Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very good day to all of you, my dear students. I hope that you're doing well. I welcome you in our special lecture, and I won't be giving it a number because that sequence will continue. This is with reference to the recently assigned task, the project task on which you are working, you have been provided some of the instructions, and it's basically divided into parts. You have already started working over it, and with respect to all the details that you need and to help you out in order to work it in a better way, this lecture is being prepared for you. And that's why it's called as the project lecture. And I want you to focus on each and every point as you have been given the instructions within your section 1, or I call it as the first assignment of this project, in which you have to come up with the introduction and the proper literature survey, and to talk about the methodology which you have to use in order to work on your specific topic on which you along with your other group members are already working. And moving ahead, once you have compiled and composed that part 1, you have to work on the second draft, the draft 2, in which of course you have to provide all the results which you have attained as a result of carrying out the analysis. Then on the basis of all those results, coming up with some discussion, and on the basis of that discussion you come and conclude everything which you have researched on during this project, and on the basis of which at the end you're going to give your recommendations. And then all the formatting which you have to do, and the next step of course of presenting it, for which you already have all the instructions within our lectures, but to specially work on the project itself and all the guidance and the instruction that you need, you have to focus on what's coming ahead. And I want you to listen to each and every component very carefully, because you're going to see how each and every component that you have to jot down and prepare within this draft is directly related to the concepts that you have studied within the lecture. So follow it very carefully. You're going to see how prepared I am within the upcoming few minutes, and I want you to be as careful and as ready as I am in order to understand each and every point which is coming ahead. So let us begin. Over here within this lecture, you're going to see how all the things that we have been studying within the previous lecture are directly related with your project report that you have to work on, that you have been assigned or will be assigned and have to complete and submit to your moderators. That is the reason because of which today's lecture has been prepared. And for this specific lecture, a specific report has been chosen. You have the reference at the end, the very last slide. You can look into it in detail. But of course, how each and every component of a report has to be structured and has to be written, keeping in view all the strategies that you have learned, was the focus. And keeping in view that focus, all the slides have been designed alongside some of the examples, of course, taken from that particular report. So of course, the way you have to begin this exercise of working on your project, how to commence, how to begin, and what are the basic key points which should be there within your mind, are few things which are covered within our today's lecture. Our report which has been chosen for this guidance regarding the project report, it's also more or less related with what we have been covering so far, making you a good professional, and what basically becomes a barrier, what basically stops you from performing a good task. So one way or another, this report which has been chosen as a sample to make you understand how to first start thinking on a topic. Of course, you begin with how to think on a topic, then selecting a topic, and then once you have chosen, or once a topic has been assigned to you, then what are the basic things through which you have to move ahead with this exercise of working on a project report. So our today's lecture is more or less related with this task of understanding and planning that you need to work on your project report. The first thing, of course, when you are looking for a problem or when you have been assigned a topic, so within that topic you need to first of all identify the problem. As I talked about within the very starting lectures, that was the purpose, to make you realize that how it has to be structured. Now you have to practically apply all those points that we have been studying. You need to identify a problem, because a report is particularly written to simply communicate some information with respect to a problem, because you identify it, then you examine it, and then you of course try to resolve it by coming up with some suggestions and recommendations which are written at the end. So it all will begin with this identification. This identification is going to resolve and will pave the way for what you have to cover, what you have to write within the report. And of course, for stating it directly within your report alongside your purpose. Within those headings, of course, you will see them, you will be working on them as well. You'll be provided with a set of headings within which you have to come up with some content, or of course, if headings are not there, you can of course think about those headings which are appropriate and which are needed, keeping in view the objectives, keeping in view the aims of your report. So within your purpose, this thing has to be clearly mentioned, the problem that you have identified, the problem that you'll be working on, the problem that you will be examining, and once you have carried out the analysis, what solutions are you going to propose and recommend to your upcoming audience which will be reading all the information. So it has to be clearly stated within your purpose, and you can only write your purpose if you know what basically the problem is. That's why you need the identification. And then you have the text itself taken from that report. Of course, you can look into it as well, but to make you realize how you basically structure it, just have a look at it. The purpose of this study was to determine the negative effects of stress on employees and the methods employers use to manage employees' stress. So now you clearly have the problem. You have a clear understanding what basically is the problem. Even if I ask you, you're going to say stress one way or another is becoming the problem. It is affecting the performance of all the employees, and moving ahead, employers are coming up with some solutions to channel that stress, get it aside, and to improve the overall performance of the individuals working in an organization. So this is clearly defined, and this has to be mentioned here when it comes to the purpose of your study. So have a look at it, beautifully written within the 2 lines. That is how, once a topic is assigned to you, or once you have chosen your own topic, that is the way you're going to initiate when the time comes, when it comes to the exact formatting and structuring of your report. Right after giving a bit of background information, that is how you're going to write your purpose, of course, under the heading of purpose. You move ahead. The next thing that you need to be clearly sure of course, that is how you begin. This is your understanding and planning with respect to a topic, clearly identifying what basically is the problem. When you look at a topic, you have to identify where is basically the problem that I have to clearly define and mention for my audience, because your audience, as you remember, as we studied, is basically from different categories. It can be high-tech, can be low-tech, and it can be the lay audience, can be the multiple readers and the multicultural readers as well. So keeping in view all those facts, you have to simply clarify each and every point, and the next step basically, right after identifying the problem that you have stated within the purpose, you move ahead to determine this scope of your report. Now this scope can also cause a bit of confusion, and sometimes you're unable to differentiate it from other components of a report. But the point here is, if you look at what I have written over here, to avoid this overgeneralization of your results and statistics. This thing basically says all about this scope. If I talk about this scope, scope is basically this line that you draw around that area. This is the area where you are basically carrying out your study. Now the point here is that all the results, all the findings are not about this area which is outside this circle. The results are basically belonging to this within the circle. The results are from this circle, and this line, this boundary of the circle is basically like a scope. You basically determine what is the area around which you have kept yourself and you have carried out the study. And one thing to mention here is that it's not possible to generalize the results of that specific area over the other areas as well, because that study was basically carried out with respect to that typical area, all the things. And that these are the things which you have to mention. You have to clearly define that area, that what was that area within which you have carried out the study, which means that once you have defined that area, it will have its difference from all the other areas as well in which future studies will be carried out. And the purpose of defining this scope is that this scope can be used by future researchers to have a comparative analysis as well. For example, this is one circle, I draw this one, and this circle is being drawn by another researcher as well. So once they define this circle, the effects will not be around the other areas as well, but still these two circles can be compared and contrasted by some other third researcher as well, that according to this author or this researchers, these were the findings. Then there was another author who defined another area in which he or she carried out the study. The results were a bit different, and now the third person or the third researcher simply picks up a third area, different area, to have this comparative analysis of three different areas to see what are the similarities and what are the differences. So that is how you basically build up a literature review. That is how you basically increase the knowledge of yourself as well as for your readers as well. This clearly shows that you are a thorough reader and you are simply going through all the components, all the research, all the scientific findings which are more or less related to what you want to do and what you are about to do. So to make things more clear, the examples would once again suffice and will tell you how you basically determine the scope of your own study. Well, in this case where the report was all about the effects of stress on the employee's working performance and all those means or the methodologies which are being used by the employers to channel that stress or to reduce that stress. Well, in that case, what was the scope of that study or that report? This study was, this study was limited to the perceptions of full-time business employees. So this line says it all. Talking about this area, within this area, the employees which were studied, the employees whose feedback was collected were all full-time business employees. First thing, which means that all the other people who are like working on part-time basis, either in this organization or in any other organization, their results would probably be different, their attitude would be different, their feedback would be different, which means it cannot be generalized over here that the feedback coming from the part-time working employees will be exactly the same as these people who are working full-time within an organization. You can have multiple interpretation when it comes to full-time employees. It can be either in case of 6 days, it means that they are doing 6 hours per week, and in case of people who have 2 days off and if they have to complete 40 hours per week, then that means that they are doing 8 hours per week. So they're coming 5 days, working 8 hours per day. And in case of people who have this Saturday on, and meaning 6 days, 6 working days, 1 Sunday off, in that case, of course, it's like their hours, working hours are reduced to from 8 to 6 hours. So this definition could also vary, but over here they would have clearly defined what do they mean by this full-time business employees as per the contract, as per the rules and regulation of that working organization. So they would have of course provided what do they mean by this full-time, because even when you will get the contract, when any employee gets the contract of an organization, so it's clearly mentioned over here that these are your working hours. But moving ahead, looking back towards the scope, one point has been made clear. Moving ahead, this study was restricted to business operating in the Central Texas area. So now you have clearly defined area, just the way I mentioned, meaning that the results that you get from any other area, from any other state, from any other region will be different, meaning cannot be generalized. The results that you are getting from this Central Texas area cannot be generalized over the other areas as well, that the results would be the same, or the full-time business employees of any other area will have the same results. They are going to have some different opinion, and it varies from situation to situation, from region to region. There will be versatility. So point number 2 also clear with respect to a scope. Let's look to point 3. For the purpose of this study, stress is defined as disruptive or disquieting influences that negatively affect an individual in the workplace. Now look at the way that even the word or the thing or the basic component which is being studied, or that variable which is being studied, which is being analyzed, it's being defined at the very first place. Within the scope, you are defining what do we mean by that variable that is going to vary, and its feedback will be collected from all the employees, of course full-time business employees when it comes to this study. So you are defining what do you mean by it, because stress can have multiple definitions, as you have seen within my previous lectures as well. There were certain concepts for which I provided you with some dictionary definitions, and I was not just restricted to, and I do not restrict myself to a single definition. I use multiple references for the purpose that you should have multiple opinions with respect to a single concept or a single phenomenon. In a similar way, over here within this study, you can see, as you will also apply it within your own project, you have to clearly define the variable that you are studying within your own project, just the way it has been defined here in case of the scope of the study. So stress is being studied here as this disruptive or disquieting influences that negatively affect an individual in the workplace. So there could be other definitions as well, but over here this is the definition in which this is basically the scale in which it will be measured. And then you move ahead, another range. We had some special range, that's range, this boundary within space. Now you're going to see this boundary within time. Data for this study were collected during the fall of 2002. Fall means, of course, you had that American reference that I gave you for the seasons. So that is basically the time in which the ending stages of 2002 in which the data has been collected. Or if you look at the year itself, 2002, meaning the data can vary, could have varied if it had been collected within 2001. It would vary in 2003, 4, 5, and even moving ahead. As you move ahead, it can vary. So it can't be fixed. So you have to define the boundary with respect to space, with respect to time, and all the other components which can vary when it comes to your study or your field or your area of study. So everything has to be covered when you are specifically talking about your scope, and these things are supposed to be written when you are writing a scope. So it has a separate heading as well. And now I believe, I'm sure, I know that under the heading of scope you are aware, you are sure what has to be written and what has to be discussed, of course, with your mates, with your friends, with your class fellows or your group members, what has to be written, what are the boundary lines, what things are to be marked, and once they have been marked, what has to be written within the report itself. So you identify the problem. Moving ahead, you determine what is basically the scope or that boundary, and whose results cannot be applied or generalized beyond that boundary. So this is basically the purpose of a scope once you write it as well. So let's move ahead. The next stage within your understanding and planning is determining the target audience and need. So this one is also, if you look back, we talked about the nature of the audience. Within that audience, we discussed them in two ways. With respect to a report, we talked about the technical readers, the managerial readers, the journal readers, within which I told you that the managerial readers are one way or another related with just the executive summary. You talk about the journal readers, they just want to know all the explanation because they are not aware of things. And the technical ones are just looking towards, they just want to see your graphs, your figures, your graphics. They'll understand and they'll interpret it, everything on their own. So they have their own ways of looking at your report. And moving ahead with respect to the technical writing, we talked about them in detail, dividing them into categories as high-tech, low-tech, and lay audience. And in that way, of course, I told you that this way of writing would vary because things would be quite short and brief when it comes to very high-tech. In case of your low-tech, it will be more or less some short material alongside some explanation, because they are not as advanced as the high-tech. Whereas the lay-tech, or I would say the lay audience, they will simply ask for explanation for each and every component because they are looking at things right from the scratch. So you would be writing things in a way that could be comprehensible, comprehensible, and easy to follow. This is the point. You have not started working on the project, but this is the stage, the pre-project stage basically, where you have to determine the target audience, who is going to be the target audience, and in this case of your report, who is the target audience and what are their needs and how are they going to get the benefit out of it. Is it just about getting the benefit, or is it about initiating some action that you want? Everything has to be determined in this stage. Once you have just determined, you have identified the problem and you have set a line for yourself. What are the needs of the audience after understanding the nature of the audience? So if you look at it, just have a quick look, as these points are going to tell you how you state them, and you basically why this thing is basically important, the way I just talked about, why this understanding nature of the audience and their need, because it's directly related. This understanding is directly related with your significance of the study. Now this is once again another component of your report, your project report, which has to be covered, and some content of course has to be written within this section as well. But you can only write something when you are sure what to write over here. So if you know what is your audience, what is the nature of the audience, what are the expectation of the audience, you can only address it once you know who is the audience. And now look at the way how the benefits that the audience is going to get as a result of this study are clearly stated here. There are three primary groups that may benefit from this study. Okay, you have the employees, you have the employers, and the educator. Not just restricted, we are looking at the workplace environment, the way stress is affecting, but even the educator, this becomes an interesting part. Why? Well, if we move ahead, first look at the way, after defining who are the real beneficiaries of the results and all the discussion and all the study which is being carried out, the way you are supposed to write it. Just the reference of the first category or the first group, of course, talking about the employees, look at the way how they are going to get the benefit as written within the significance of the study. The first group over here, consisting of employees in today's business organization, may learn to identify ways that stress negatively affects their work performance. Identifying the negative effects may enable them to take necessary action to cope with stress. They have to take some actions once they know these are the things which are being affected by stress negatively. And by sharing this knowledge, employees can act as a vehicle to help management implement appropriate stress reduction programs. So they'll have this self-assessment as a result of looking at this report and its results and its finding. Okay, these are the things which are being pointed out by people like us working in organization. So these are the reasons, or these are the things which are being affected as a result of taking stress. And now once you have identified them by reading it, because you are the employee, just the way it has been mentioned here, so now you can reduce it. And not only just reduce it by finding the solution, you can then recommend it by, of course, writing on your own report. You can become the researcher. Once you have the results, you can just counter these findings by coming up with some solutions. So they can pave the way for the management to implement appropriate stress reduction programs. So this is basically the benefit of just the first group. Just look at the way it has been beautifully stated within this section of the significance of the study. Just one category. In a similar way, you write it in the next paragraph or followed by the manner in which it has been ended. For the employers, in case of the employers, the way it has been written, you can look into it as well. They want to reduce this stress. So if they look at the findings of this study or of this report, this will pave the way for what are the basic things, what are those stress reduction programs which are more effective, and the percentage, the results are going to clearly show it, be it pie chart or some statistics, some graphs, some histogram. But the point here is they'll see the percentage, especially the technical readers. The managerial are going to, of course, look at the executives and see what are the findings. Which thing is more effective? So that has to be clearly written within the executive summary as well. But right now, we are at the planning stage, and that's why things have to be made more clear. Point here is, that is why you're going to clearly define how employers can get the benefit as well within the significance of the study. If once they read the results, they will know what thing is more effective to reduce stress, and they'll start working on it. In case of the educator, you have to write, or you as written over here within this report as well. So you come to the third stage, in which the educators or the teachers, the instructors or the academic, they are going to simply train and plan and prepare all the students to simply manage these things at the very start. They're going to give them practical situations within these universities in which they can have different role plays. The purpose of these role plays would be to first make them aware of the stress, how it is induced, and then how do they try to cope with it? How do they come up with the strategies which are taught, which are instructed by these educators, as these educators have gone through these reports. So they know what are the solutions. So they're going to make them well prepared before they actually enter into a workplace, into an organization. So that is how the educators are going to get the benefit as well. And even we can write a fourth category, students, pupils, the upcoming younger generation. So they're going to get the benefit as a result of the educators, but they fall within the same umbrella of a university or an academic environment. So that is how you basically, after determining your target audience and their need, state the things, state the benefits within the significance of the study, the most probable advantages of the benefits that they are going to get. So I hope that things are becoming more interesting, you're getting more clear about it, but that's not the end of the story. We still have to move ahead. We are at the planning stage. Things made clear, now is the time in which you have to do a bit of this, trying to point out why we just went through that writing process. Now you know, I explained it to you in detail. We talked about the pre-writing, we talked about the writing stage, or you call it as the drafting stage, and then of course the revising stage, or you can call it as the rewriting stage, the last stage of the writing process. But right now, reference of pre-writing. Why? Because you have to prepare a rough outline for yourself. Of course, there is an outline within your report as well under the heading table of contents, within which you provide all the sections, all the headings which are there within your report, alongside different page number, within which you simply refer to each section that the details of this section will be available on this page. But the point here is that this is the stage. You have done the planning with respect to audience, significance of the study, with respect to the purpose, and everything has been set. You know the scope, you know the purpose, you know the significance. Right after it, you come towards the stage of pre-writing. You need an outline. How do you want to start working on your project? That is the stage where you need this rough outline, and for that, I want you to just follow up all those skills that you have learned, and we can just count them on our fingers as well. They are long. All the pre-writing strategies we talked about: free writing, clustering, looping, and there were many more, listing, and then there were the heuristic methods, in which there were Aristotle's common question and technemics, and many more. I can just name them as long as I am able to remember them. So the ones which came in mind, I have mentioned them. But the point here is you have to make an outline. I believe you can use listing as well to list all those headings that you want to be there within your report, and you're going to write all the details under each and every heading. Moving ahead, what could be there? All the subsections that you need under the major headings. What are those major headings? You need the introduction, you need a literature review, a solid literature review. Then you need to clearly define what method has been chosen to carry out the study. Then you carried out the analysis, then you found some results, and as a result of which you gave some conclusion leading towards this recommendation. So the point here is, the purpose of this pre-writing is that within this pre-writing you clearly write these big headings, and within those big headings, what else should be there in the form of subsection? Well, this is the time, and this is the purpose of pre-writing. Now do you realize why pre-writing is important? It's not just about making you a good writer. It's good you simply apply these strategies, that will turn you into a good writer, but it's directly related with this project as well. So that's how this pre-writing becomes important. Now is the time to do all the clustering, add and link all the different ideas which are there within your mind together with this one single body that you need. There was one other technique that I talked about, it came to my mind: circling. Circling was that you start with your own perspective, you broaden that circle to take others' perspective, and you broaden it more to take world's perspective. So you need, that's why you need all those pre-writing to make you aware of what to include, how to include, and in what order. So that's how pre-writing becomes important. And once you have done this basic exercise of the pre-writing, the next stage is that you move to the writing stage, or I call it as the drafting stage. The stage in which you basically start writing as well. The stage in which you should be aware of applying that Lucy approach that we talked about: length, unity, coherence, and emphasis. Everything has to be there when you are writing your draft, when you are working under each and every heading. You maintain unity with the central topic. It can be, if I talk about the topic, okay, unity with the thesis statement, okay, within a paragraph, unity with the topic sentence of all the supporting details which are coming, and things the way they are connected with one another. One sentence connected with another, it connected with the first one, the third connected with first and second. This is coherence. So proper length, what information should be there, then unity with the central topic, cohesion and coherence with things which are coming interlinked with one another, and emphasizing the most important points. So that's the way you basically move ahead when you talk about the drafting stage. And of course there is always a space of some errors, but you have to ignore them. Right now is the time when you just have to write whatsoever comes in mind, because you need to come up with something. Refining and then making it perfect can be done afterwards. So within your drafting stage, applying Lucy, you basically write the introduction first, and within this introduction the purpose here is to clarify your own self as well as to what to work on. So not only you are writing for the others, you are writing for yourself as well. That's why the study part comes first, and once you have studied something you would be able to write it. So provide some background which leads towards the focus of this study and the resultant outcome. So if you have done the study, you will know how to talk about the problem, as it will be covered within the focus, and you will move ahead to talk about the outcome. What would be the resultant outcome of everything that I am studying, the way I am analyzing, the way I'll provide you with the results? What would be the ultimate outcome? So look at the text, and it's all about the way stress is being highlighted, the way it negatively affects the working performance, the working condition of the employees, the business employees. Today, many organizations and employees are experiencing the effects of stress on work performance. The effects of stress can be either positive or negative. What is perceived as positive stress by one person may be perceived as negative stress by another, since everyone perceives situations differently. That's the way you basically set a background. You are gradually moving towards stress, and first the stress, then talking about the positive stress and the negative stress, and then the perception, which may vary, can be positive for one person, negative for another. But the point is, what is being highlighted? Keeping unity with stress, the way things are connected, coherence, positive stress, negative stress. But the thing is, you are discussing stress and you are emphasizing stress. So this is the way, within proper length, you have provided some proper information. But length doesn't mean that within these 4 lines you just simply provide everything. When it's needed, you can go into detail as well, as this is just a sample, the way I've taken it to explain the points to you, that how things are connected with one another. So this is the way in which sentences are being connected, not just this way but this way as well. Things are connected. This basically becomes the cohesion and the coherence, the linkage which is there, and basically the unity lies with the main thing which is being studied, that is stress. Then comes your next stage, where you have to move and talk about literature that you have studied. Once again, keeping, first of all, linking your own study with the other studies which have their own scope, which have their own specific area. I'm talking especially with reference to this literature review that you have to write, that you have to mention, because within the previous section, as I mentioned, providing a proper background within the introduction, then highlighting the purpose, you have to write the purpose within that previous section. Just the way you simply determine what is basically you are about to do. We have talked about it. So you simply start with the background, then you provide the purpose, and then you mention the scope, the boundary, the way you have already done it, and then you write the significance. So this is the way you basically write up your first section, which is the introductory session. You support it and prove yourself that you have gone through each and every material by providing a solid, a proper literature review, a review of related literature which is one way or another supporting what you are doing, because it has been done in some other area, meaning some other scope was defined by some other researchers, and you are trying to either do a similar thing or one way or another a bit related task, but in another area. So it becomes a bit related and it has to be mentioned. But this mentioning is not just the only thing that you do within this review of related literature. It's about this critical thinking on an issue. Let's say if it's just about the stress, so you have to mention that you are critically thinking how this thing is affecting. So first you mention the significance, how important this issue has become, and then you prove that importance by mentioning and highlighting and citing other sources, other authors who are also working on that area. So point here is, you within this section formulate a deeper, a more profound understanding of the problem which is under investigation. And that is basically only done when you have gone through things yourself as well. So that's why this section requires and demands you to do some good comprehensive study, some good detailed study. You can go to the library to do the study, or you can of course do it back at home if you have a good internet connection, because this information superhighway is available within your smartphone, within your tablet, within your laptop, within your PC. Pointer is, information is there, you just have to access and study it. Then another thing that you have to do while working on this review of related literature is to develop creative solutions to the problem as well. So not just mentioning, critical thinking, formulating a good understanding, and then thinking, paving this way for some good creative solution which should be there to resolve this problem which is being investigated not only by you but by so many others who are working under that same area. And you have provided a proof. Proof itself is there within this section of review of related literature, that the following person has worked on this area, these were the findings. The following person has also worked on that area or a bit similar area, a bit different variable, and these were the findings. So keeping in view all these works, it can be clearly realized how important this task is, which is why it is also being taken here within my own context, within this new scope that I have set, and I am going to come up with my own findings as well. And keeping in view those findings, certain solutions shall be recommended. So that's how you basically pave the way for some creative solution which would come ahead as you move forward. When it comes to what basically to cite or what to study, your sources can be newspapers, periodicals, business books, directories, almanacs, statistical resources, government publication, electronic databases. So these are some of the sources. I can say many sources if you start looking at them, but you can get a lot of information, a lot of statistics, graphs, pictures, many things are there. Depends on the kind of data you are studying, the data you are collecting, the data you want to analyze. So your source would also vary, but the most probable sources through which data is collected are already provided here in front of you. You can see them. While looking and while going through all these sources, another thing that you need to keep in mind is to look for author's credibility, honesty and reliability of the source or the work, of reliability of all the findings. They should be valid, reliable, and of course by some credible author. This is basically the purpose of the studied material. When you are going through all the things, when you are studying these components, so you have to keep these things in mind as well. And this shall be your, and this should be your criteria while picking up those components which are directly related, the works which are directly linked, to make a big body of knowledge of which you are also a part. So you just simply show yourself that you are not the only one, but this thing is important, and that's why it has been taken in different scenarios, in different contexts. This is the place, this is the section in which you basically do this. So now if I just give you the examples of the way we have been talking, the points that we have been discussing, look at the way beautifully cited and providing all the explanation. So if I read this one, Baden, a freelance writer specializing in healthcare and a former manager, managing editor of Commerce and Health, stated the importance of wellness programs and gave specific examples of corporations that are successfully implementing such programs. So this is basically a reference to those stress reducing programs that the employers are initiating, the employers are basically starting within that organization to reduce that stress of their working employees. Employers mean the boss, the administration, the way they are starting and initiating the program. So this is basically a direct reference that this author or the writer of this report is taking here, referring or citing Barden over here. Foster, a professional speaker on stress management, surveyed mid-level managers and found stress to be a major determinant in worker productivity. And according to the study, the primary areas affected by stress are employee morale, absenteeism, and decision-making abilities. So clearly mentioning what were the things which were identified by this one within this study. So you are about to work on similar areas, but you are paving the way for your study by first strengthening your work by providing or linking it with already existing body of knowledge in which similar kind of work has already been done, highlighting the fact that it is an important issue and which is why it has remained the subject of study and the focus of the audience, focus of the other researchers as well. Harold and Wayland reported that increasing stress affects morale, productivity, organizational efficiency, and many other things which have been identified. So not just one, not just two, there should be many, and many means the way you simply determine it, keeping in view the provided time and nature of your work. These will become those key factors which are going to determine how many references should be there to determine and to make your work more authentic, more valid and strong. So but that is how you basically have to provide the references. As Morer stated that stress-induced illnesses are prevalent in the workplace today, and stress is the problem of the sufferer and the employer, meaning everyone almost in different organizations with different references, stress is becoming a key factor affecting their overall performance. And within this one, a stress management consultant stated that stress causes problem in the workplace which negatively affect employee health and organizational productivity. Need not to go into the detail. The purpose here is to give you an idea. Just look at the way the examples are coming one after the other. The example itself also have that Lucy approach within it. With proper length you are writing literature review. There is a unity with that central point. You are highlighting that effect of stress on the working performance. Unity is there. One after the other, these things are linked, meaning coherence is also there. And you are basically emphasizing what stress can do to the overall working organization and the working condition of the employees working. This is the way in which Lucy keeps on working in every writing that you are doing. That's how this drafting stage becomes important. And now you know how to simply write each and every component. Another example here for you. Many companies instituted stress management programs that led to a decline in absenteeism, a decrease in sickness and accident cost, or an increase in job performance. Stress inventory available from a stress management program can assist executives and managers in assessing employee stress. So don't you see a creative solution as well, or a similar to a creative solution? When you are referring to others' work, they're going to provide you with some set of solutions as well. A set of solutions which are coming from different sources, meaning that if you simply combine all the solutions together, you can come up with some good creative solutions as well. I'm not saying just to simply copy paste each and every solution which has been provided. You are citing them, which means you are acknowledging their efforts. But the purpose here is that you can extract an idea of an idea, extract a new idea from an existing idea. So that study is going to basically help you to set up your own objectives, to set up the way you are going to come up with a solution as well. That's how literature review becomes the important part. The next stage, you have done it, is to write this methodology. What method was there for the inquiry, for the whole study, how you have carried it out, and within this method of inquiry section, you basically have to theoretically describe, you have to basically come up with this theoretical description of this design, the whole design through which you have carried out the study, how you have simply defined your population, how you have taken the sample, what sampling technique was there, and then how have you simply collected the data from that sample. What sources of data collection were used to collect and extract data from that sample of the population. So this is the place in which you have to clearly determine the design which suits your needs, meaning these can be the sources of data collection. It can be a survey, it can be an interview or a questionnaire, or any other source of data collection that you can design and can simply defend it before the moderators. So it all depends on whether it's really practicable, applicable, and in that sense, of course, you can apply it. But this is the stage in which you have to clearly define it. And the point here is that this basically section covers the source of the data, how it was collected. Now look at the way, once again, example from the sample to make you realize the way you have to write it for yourself. The data for this study were collected using a questionnaire developed by a group of students at Southwest Texas State University. So basically it was a questionnaire which was developed by students. The questionnaire was divided into 3 parts. Those 3 parts are basically, you have to provide a description of that questionnaire as well, that within this methodology section, because it's all about the theoretical description. Within this case, providing them certain qualities, or you can say productivity, performance, and presentation skills, communication skills. These are certain variables. These are the variables which are being affected by, call it as the independent variable, and the dependent variable which are being affected. I'm not that good at statistics, but the point it is that if you make this as an independent variable, stress, which is affecting the dependent variables, all the performance criteria, so it has an effect on all those. So within this questionnaire, these dependent variables have been placed, and with respect to the stress, the feedback has been taken by the employees that how are you going to mark each and every variable which is being affected by the stress, and then you got a percentage. So this was part 1. Part 2 was about picking up those variables which were most affected. One variable which was the mostly affected variable as a result of that stress, which was highly affected, and it had the major percentage. The second part of this second portion of this questionnaire is to mark that variable which was least affected as a result of that stress, and then you once again got a percentage. And the last section of that questionnaire was about to simply get a demographic profile. How many people were there, what were their ages, how many boys, how many girls, and from which area. So it was all about demographics. So in this way the questionnaire was structured, the way it was designed, and its theoretical description should be there, and the sample itself will go directly at the end of your report in the form of appendices. So this questionnaire itself will go at the end, but its description should be there within this method of inquiry. You have to mention it for your readers. Now just look at it. I just talked about it to make you understand, and right now over here in written these things are there for you as well. Part 1 consists of list of 15 work performance areas which will be marked by the respondents, that whether it increased or decreased. So this is the point. And in the second part, a list of this was missed, I guess I miscalculated it. This was also part of the part 1 in which they had to mention which one was highly affected and which was least affected. The second part of this questionnaire was that a list of 17 programs were provided and the respondents were asked to indicate which program their company had implemented to manage stress. This was the second part of this basically questionnaire. The first one was that what are the areas becoming the dependent variable which are being affected as a result of stress, which are highly affected, least affected. The second part is what stress reduction programs are being introduced and applied and implemented by the employers, by the boss, by the administration of an organization for the well-being of their employees. What are they doing? And then once again they got a percentage from the employees in which few things were marked highest, few things were marked lowest. And at the end, part 3 was designed to collect this demographic data. So this is the actual questionnaire, the way it was. I just missed this second part, confused it with this one, but now you can look into it as well. You can see the reference to have another good idea about it. This is the point. A copy of such questionnaire to be provided within the appendix section, as I mentioned here, and within this same, not talking about the appendix, this is your task, you place it at the end. Within the methodology, you have to clearly provide this section of sample selection, within which you have to talk about what is your population, who is your population, and from that population, how have you taken that sample. What sampling technique has been used. There are different sampling techniques, you can Google them as well. Systematic sampling, random sampling, simple random sampling. These are the ones which were in my mind. Then there are probability sampling, non-probability sampling, few more. But of course you can look into it. You have to basically pick one, decide which one has to be used to collect your sample. And there is another one coming in mind, convenience sampling. So a sampling technique used for convenience. Whatever comes for convenience of the study, you apply it. So the respondents involved in this survey were employees working in companies located in Central Texas. That's how you got your respondents. Then the non-probability convenience sampling technique was used. That's why it came in my mind. Was used to collect the primary data, and each member of the research team was responsible for distributing 3 questionnaires to members of the sample. So this is the way the study was carried out, the way you have simply described it theoretically, mentioning the population, sampling technique, and the way the questionnaire was designed. Each and everything coming, sources of the data, population, and sampling, all within the methodology section. And if there is any statistical method, because there are different tools, you already are quite well aware of them, might be, and some might be like me, just aware of the names. I have tried to use few, but I won't say that I have the expertise. But statistical package of social sciences, SPSS, I have attended few workshops to get a good hold of it, but sometimes you can miscalculate things as well, so you always need some practice. But of course the tutorials are available. There is another AMOS. Few of my colleagues have been talking about it, referring to it. It's also used for, so you people are the better judge. But if there is any statistical software that you are using for the analysis, or if there is any method that you're going to use for collecting the data, for analyzing the data, so you have to mention it, as in simple statistical techniques were used to tabulate the results of the study. And the primary data were analyzed using a percent of response. To compute the percent of response, the number of responses to each choice was divided by the total number of respondents who answered the question, followed by additional details. But this is the basic formula through which for each variable the percentage was collected. You got the formula, and you have to mention it within your method as well. Moving ahead, you have to mention the limitation of the study as well. This is also one section which has to be covered within your report. It of course comes at the beginning stage, and it basically paves the way for further research as well. As in, this study may be limited through the use of a questionnaire as a data collection instrument, because questionnaire must generally be brief. Areas that may have been affected by stress may not have been included in the questionnaire. a big possibility, and if there is any possibility which is there within your case study, so it has to be mentioned by you as well. Also, all programs that may be available to employees may not have been mentioned or may not have been covered within this study, and may possibly be covered by some other researchers as well. So that thing has to be mentioned as well. Moving ahead, the study was also limited to a use of this non-probability convenience sampling. So was chosen for convenience and may not be the representative of the total population. Again, the same point. Think of that scope that I talked about. So this one is also related. These things are interrelated, can be a bit confusing, but you have to clearly draw a line between the way you write this and this. So pointer is you have to mention all the limitations, which paves the way for the further research and further study as well. Now comes the stage of your results and discussion, meaning based on that method, you have carried out the study, you have applied that method to collect the data, you got the data, and now you have to provide the results. And the results and discussion section is basically providing the information in the form of textual explanation, and this is also accompanied with this tables, figures and diagrams. Now it depends once again nature of the audience. In case of your high tech, they'll just look at this one, the technical readers. In case of this explanation, that means that the general readers are also there and asking for the explanation. So you have to design it keeping in view the nature of the audience. Then you have the demographic profile as well. This is basically the example which was part of your questionnaire. So first of all, this one is coming, as you can see within the diagram as well. So the technical reader was simply going to look at this one or this one, and they'll get an idea. Okay, people less than 20 are 2.1%, people above 60 and over are 3.3%, and so on. And for the convenience of the journal, you write it. All returned responses from the sample were considered full-time employees. The respondents were also asked to indicate their age, and these ages have been provided. And its textual explanation also comes afterwards, right after the graph. Now talking about those areas which are affected by stress. First you write them, of course, once again for the general readers. Now look at it. Only respondents who indicated stress negatively affected an area were considered within these findings, and of the 15 areas, 4 areas were identified as having a response rate of more than 15%. And these have been highlighted: morale, courtesy, accuracy, creativity. So these things have been affected, and you once again support your findings by citing another author. You cite it to support your findings. This is also another good strategy. Score stated that a significant number of employees is negatively affected by stress. Once again, the references are there. So, and to provide a pictorial figure, that's the way you provide the information for those high-tech readers or the technical readers. So the same information for the general one in a general textual form, the textual explanation, and you move ahead, you provide it in the form of this graphical form. Then what are the basic programs which are being introduced to manage stress? You write them in this way. These are the percentages. Insurance received the highest number of responses. So based on the feedback that they collected from all the people, from all the employees, insurance was placed at the top. And from this it can be concluded, and within this discussion section of this report it will be highlighted as well. But that's the way you write the percentage, and then you provide it in the form of a table as well. So the people who are not that much comfortable in reading the text are going to simply look at the figure and will figure it out themselves. Once you do this, you come to the final stage within which you basically write the conclusion. And this conclusion has to be written very carefully, as we studied it at the very beginning. Once again, the same points that you basically draw a logical deduction. You logically reduce the points based on the results and findings. In addition to those findings, you summarize these findings, and alongside you mention some objectives, that the purpose was this and these were the findings. That's the way you write it. Purpose, and then these were the findings. So this has to be the sequence, the way in which you basically, that's the only way in which you can logically reduce from the general purpose moving towards those specific findings that you got. And in addition, you highlight the significant elements as well. As in this case, on the basis of the findings, several conclusions concerning the effects of stress on business employees can be drawn. The findings of the study indicated that stress does negatively affect the work performance. Job satisfaction and productivity were indicated as two areas most affected by work-related stress. Therefore, stress cannot be considered just an individual issue, because reduced job satisfaction and lower productivity has a direct effect on company as a whole. Beautifully summarized. Now, you are on one end highlighting it and logically deducing it that it has a big effect on company as a whole. This is deduction based on the summary of the findings. So you are summarizing and logically deducing and highlighting the significant elements. That's the way you write it. In a similar way, from this study, it can be concluded that employers have realized the importance of managing stress because of the wide variety of programs which are now offered. The first part was that what is basically being affected, now with what is most effective strategy to counter that stress. So of all the programs offered by employers, insurance is the most frequently offered, as it had this percentage of 72%, if I'm not wrong. So that's the way you write it. Now look at the way logical deduction based on the summary of findings, highlighting the significant elements. Apply it over here. Insurance is the most frequently offered means for managing stress. Because insurance acts as a security net for employees and is offered the most, it can be inferred, logical deduction, that employers contend that insurance is the most effective means for managing stress. So you highlight the significant element by logically deducing it based on the summary of findings. So this is basically the formula while writing your conclusion. And based on that conclusion, you basically pave the way for recommendation. And how do you basically write recommendation? Staying brief, writing it to the point, keeping it clear, meaning simple sentences, not too many tricky sentences, and keeping it very concise with a limited use of words. Refer back to those 7 C's of communication we studied, and these are the way in which you apply them. While referring to these recommendations, you have to keep in mind their implementation of all the recommendation, how applicable they are, and how suitable are the findings. So these things should be there as well. And they should also suggest some topics for further research as well. These should be the components, and that's the way you can see them within your recommendation section. That's the way you write them. Based on the findings and conclusion, the following recommendations are made. Employers should offer various stress reduction programs to help employees manage stress, because stress is prevalent in the workplace. Employers should conduct a survey of the programs they already offer to discover which programs are most effective, and so on. I do not wish to just read each and every point here. First two are very much clear and they make sense. That's the way you basically write them: brief, clear, and concise. That's the way you do it, and basically paving the way for further research topics which can be taken to support your work and to pave way for other works as well. So this is the way you can come up with some good drafting, and once this is done, that doesn't mean you can simply submit it to your moderator or your teacher. You still have to go through another stage, and that is the final stage of the writing process: revising it, editing it, and proofreading it. Now, what do I mean by it? When it comes to your revision, think of that A3R approach, ARRR approach: addition, rearrangement, and replacement and removal. So these were the 3 R's alongside the A3R approach. Apply to revise your content, or give it to another one he or she will do it for you. Then comes, after the feedback, you look at it once again for editing. And when you start proofreading, then you know those signs that I taught you, the signs for deletion, for adding a paragraph, for inserting a comma, for full stop, capitalization, italics. So you can do the proofreading as well if you are doing it with a pen. Otherwise, if you are doing it on a PC, on a laptop or a tab, I won't stop you from not using those signs. So you have to revise, edit and proofread using the learned techniques. Once you do it, rewrite the final draft, and once you have done it, there is still one thing missing, and that is the executive summary. How can we miss it? Of course, these lines or this text will be the one which will be read by your managerial readers, the boss. So you have to write it very carefully. The executive summary of the whole draft at the end of your drafting stage, although it will be written at the end, but will come at the first. It will be even before your introduction. So that's why it has to be written very carefully. Within this executive summary, you have to cover your purpose, methods, findings, conclusion, and recommendation in a single paragraph. So you have to be very much careful. You know the structuring of paragraph, thesis statement, topic, sentence, supporting details, conclusion. So keeping in view all that within a single paragraph. Now this paragraph will be a bit more tricky. I gave you this difference from a common paragraph of this executive summary paragraph because this one is more tricky as it demands you to write a purpose, method, finding, conclusion, recommendation. So be careful while writing each and every component. And then prepare your works cited page following the guidelines of a particular referencing style. As we have studied them in detail, the MLA and the APA, there are other styles. So you're already provided by your instructors the instruction of the referencing style that you have to use. So you know the details, you can follow it accordingly, but this is the time when you, all the works which have been cited, now you have to prepare a detailed works cited page for it and provide it at the end. And then design the preliminary section. Now these are the things which comes at the beginning. We talked about the structure of a report. So the structure won't be complete without a proper title page, meaning to, from, date. These are the things which should be there: to, from, date and topic. Then the table of content, the TOC, we talked about in detail, providing page number. And then your executive summary will be there as you have already written it. And then include the supplementary section in the form of these works cited page that I just told you about, and the appendix which will cover this in case of this report, this questionnaire copy and the interview questions if these were asked. So this is the way in which you complete it. This is basically the reference for you to just go through it. You will have an idea. If you tell it with the lecture itself, it will help you to understand the report in a better way. But these are the things which were covered successfully. Now even I am more happy and satisfied that that was the theoretical part. Even if I talk about this lecture, it is theoretical, but to prepare you for the preparatory exercise, for the practical component of your course. So you have to work on a project. Now you know how to do it. Start from the identification and analysis, defining your purpose, scope and benefit, significance. Then the pre-writing, start doing it, making an outline, writing all the components, doing a solid literature review, defining what the method is, then getting the results, writing them for the high-tech, low-tech, lay, and then conclude the way I told you and provide some recommendation, and then do all the formatting just the way you are provided with the instruction, and you will come up with a very good report. And I wish you all the best for it. Now I need a break as well. So remember me in your prayers. Assalamu alaikum and thank you.